I had built my brand for at least, I don't know, at least 6 months, I think, of, Tej Talks, podcasting, Instagram, Facebook, etc., being super active, networking. I was everywhere. Yellow was everywhere. And because of that, the raising it took one Instagram story and an 8-minute conversation. If I didn't have 6 months of hard work, forget it. That Instagram story would have gone unnoticed, nothing. People don't want to hear this, right? It took 6 months of, social media work, which again, people don't want to do, posting videos, whatever, all these excuses.
All right, bro, let's kick off. Tej, I really appreciate you joining me on another session of kickoff sessions after your wedding, man. After your wedding, a couple of days later, I was saying to my girlfriend this morning, I was like, yeah, you had to push the time a little bit because you got married, and she was like, if you ever did that, I'd fucking kill you. So man, I appreciate it.
It's cool, man. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, it's just still recovering from it and still being tired. So yeah, hopefully I can deliver today. Hopefully my neurons wake up and start firing.
Ah, man, of course, of course. You've been at this game for quite some time, so your background is super impressive. And for anyone who's just picking this up, I could be wrong with this data figures at this point, but you've had 15 properties bought in 9 months. You've raised over 879,000 from investors, and you have a portfolio of approximately 1.3 million pound. Now that sounds crazy. There's so much things unpacked. But before we do that, I want to look at even your background before that. So you had a recruitment company and then you moved across into property. For most people, they wouldn't make that move. Why did you decide to make a leap and to do something that's in a different vertical completely?
I think so. I started a recruitment company because I was sick of like a job before working for someone where, you put in, I don't know, 8 hours a day, but you don't really get paid for 8 hours a day. I didn't feel. And, if I was half an hour past 5 o'clock, we didn't get paid for that. I was like, that's very weird because my life is not yours and I'm not going to work for free. And
Mhm.
I then sort of thought, well, what business, what job gives me what I put into it? And that could be could do it quite literally. And I think sales is something that, and sales recruitment very similar, that does that. If you make 100 calls, you're going to make more money than someone who makes 50. That's like, okay, yeah, there could be some flukes, but it's basically a fact. Like that
Mhm.
more work you put in, the more you get out. So I started that recruitment business for that exact reason. But then over 2, 3, 4 years, I didn't enjoy it. The profits were doubling every year. It was doing great, like it was, as flexible as you kind of needed. But it was like golden handcuffs. It was making money, but I didn't enjoy it. And then I
Mhm.
thought, okay, so I did this business to get out what I put into it. But now I want to get out of a business what I put into it, sort of, but not having to actually work. Not having to be like, okay, well, I've done 6 hours today, so that's good. That'll get me closer to my next fee.
Mhm.
I want to kind of have something, an asset, and my brain was sort of getting towards this, an asset or assets that will pay me based off some prior work, of course, like with anything, that would pay me when I wasn't necessarily working and I didn't have to work. I mean, I don't want to not work because I love it. And I think we go crazy as humans without work, looking at people who retire sometimes. But yeah, it was to go from that, okay, well, here's what I'm putting in, here's what I'm getting out, to I just want to get out of, I just want to get stuff from my business. And moving
Mhm.
from a time for money type model to a, you know, asset, income generating, appreciating type model business.
And that's a problem I think with a lot of like first time entrepreneurs is that they will go down the trading time for money. They'll do consulting, coaching. It's a snare time in, to be honest, man. Whereby
Mhm.
you are making revenue, but you're putting so much of your energy into it, and it's kind of like you don't actually get as much enjoyment from it sometimes because you're like, well, I've just broke my back trying to get this new recruitment client or whatever, and now it's the money that I kind of deserve at the end of it. I know you don't necessarily deserve it, but it's interesting because you moved and you made that kind of cut. But you mentioned that I read that you didn't have much experience in recruitment, and I can imagine that you didn't have much experience in property beforehand. How come you kind of dove into those two different domains? Why was it those?
So yeah, recruitment was for the kind of reason I said earlier, but also relating to your question, that was kind of one of the reasons because I suppose, I mean, I didn't do a huge amount of research into like, oh, what business could I launch? I was kind of like, right, what can I set up quickly with minimal cost, with my laptop, with a home office, with my phone? I kind of thought, what can I do? And I think I had a friend who had a recruitment business who was going to mentor me. Where's that mentoring to this day? Who knows, right? He must have got lost in it on the blockchain or something, because I never received it. Um, and I think that kind of helped my decision, because I said, okay, well, he's a good mate. He's doing it. I have questions. I get stuck. He can kind of get me set up. And he said, look, really, it's this many steps. Is the top level. Go and do it. And I suppose I sort of learned on the job, and because there isn't, well, maybe now there is, but there wasn't a dummies guide for, being a recruiter. So I kind of learned on the job. I learned by messing up. No offense to the whole recruitment industry, but it's not exactly the most complex job. Um, like, it's hard. I will say it is very hard, and emotionally, and like it is such a pain in the ass. Like you really need to be strong to be it, but it's not complex. It's not like being a cardiologist. It's just not complex. Like no one can argue with me on that. I don't care. It's just not complex, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But it's hard. It is really, really hard, and it's tough, and you've got to be strong. And so, I worked that out later when I was like, okay, the process is simple, but I'm struggling, like mentally, like trying. It was a struggle because it is so hard. And I think that I suppose that's kind of why I did it. And I learned that okay, well, the process is easy. I've learned that, but now the dealing with it part is on me as a human. And can you teach that? Yeah, I suppose, but it was kind of on me to adapt. And then with property, I think with property then and now, there's a lot more resources, books, podcasts, paid education, free stuff, YouTube, TikTok. There is so much. I mean, there was less then, but there was still enough that for free, and I think I do that now on my podcast, I could get, a rough idea of what I need to do, very rough, enough so that I could then pick and choose. So, yeah, I think those are the reasons why. And, I don't want people to kind of, because a lot of people make excuses. Oh, well, it's easy for Tej to get into property. He's been in it. Yeah, but at one time I wasn't in it, Oh, it's it's easy for you to go to the gym and do so. Yeah, but at one point it wasn't. So I don't want people to think you can't sort of jump into something and learn it, because you absolutely can with most things.
Definitely, Mike. It's the bridge at the beginning, and I think what you described there is like the learning process of doing anything, like building out the neural networks in your brain and trying to understand it. But what's really awesome about that, what I took a lot of away from, was the fact that you said, "Okay, I've done it in one domain. Now I can get up and go somewhere else and try something else." Because it's this process. It's a bit more difficult. It's a bit more complicated. But you started from point zero, and this is what I love encouraging, is the fact that, like, unless you're literally building like a fucking AI technology from scratch, you have no background in it, I think we can have a go at a lot of things. And you being a well-articulated guy, I've no problem that you were able to face that rejection in recruitment and say, oh, you know what, I can go on now to the next thing and move on to the next thing. When you did pick the route of property, though, again, you had no experience with it. Was your first approach to start a podcast around this? Like, what was the strategy as to how you were going to dip your toe into it?
Yeah, so the first thing was really to listen to podcasts first. It's just and basically go on Amazon and say, right, got a 60 quid budget, whatever. Let me buy every book that is decently reviewed on property. Let me just read it. Let me just see what the hell is happening, what it's about, blah blah blah. Go to some events, just the kind of early stuff to see, like, okay, well, what's possible? How is it possible? Is it for me? How much money do I, just to really get the lay of the land. I think with starting my own podcast, I found that despite there being lots of information out there, like I wanted to start something that would, one, give people what I didn't have when I started. And as I was starting, I kind of just felt there was a gap for something like what I could deliver. I also wanted people to learn with me. So back then I was asking questions like, what's a buy to let, or how do you, plaster a wall, or all these questions that now I know, but I was asking them because I genuinely was like, what? I don't know. Tell me this. And so I thought, I didn't really think about this, but looking back, I reflect that people connected with that because they were sitting there thinking, yeah, how'd you do that? And I would ask it innocently. Whereas a lot of podcast hosts and people won't ask stuff because they're like, no, I have to, know everything, and I have,
Of course.
whereas I was asking as I wanted to know. And I also thought, well, hold on a minute. If I'm interviewing people, I get an hour with them, learning from them. Great. But there's also potentially a relationship that could form there. So I'm kind of networking without having to, leave the house. And also, I still do this to this day. I kind of use the podcast to give people a platform who, like most property investors, are not good on social media and not good with branding. I thought, well, let me, they're still doing amazing things in property, but people aren't learning from them or knowing this because they can't use social media. So let me lift you, put you on a platform, shine the spotlight on you, and get your knowledge out there for other people.
Man, that's amazing because so many novice podcasters will pretend that they know everything. They'll put a false sense of like authority, and that's the worst position you be in. You want to ask those kind of basic one-on-one fundamental questions, but it's such a nice perspective to be in, man. Because I often find that this is not to do with just podcasting. That people who want to mentor or help people do want to help someone who's just ambitious. They can be literally dumb. They can really be dumb. But I just do find that people who are there who've done loads of property deals or whatnot, they take so much enjoyment from it because people like to teach other people. So it's so good for you to be able to put yourself into that position and say, oh, this is their approach. This is what I want to do. Did you kind of learn some things you think that you would have never got in a textbook, e.g., like the investing approach? This to me now is something I have no idea about, right? So like from that aspect, did you get on have these conversations with people? How did you kind of position yourself in that domain?
Yeah, I mean, everything I learned was kind of not in a textbook. I think there's a lot of things that, people just don't put in writing for good reason. But there's a lot of stuff that, is like experience based. A textbook, a research paper can tell you to do X, Y, Z, you know, but what actually happens in reality is different, especially because as humans, we're biologically different, not by much if you look at our genetic percentage, but we are different. The way we think is different, our upbringing, our cultures within cultures everything is so different that, you know, me being able to speak to people and saying, oh, that's how you got planning approved. Okay. Or, oh, you did this with your structural engineer. I don't know, you could do, like, there's so much you'll learn from listening to these conversations. And that I learned that at that stage was maybe too advanced for me. But as I grew and as I got to that stage, it gave me topics of conversation with people who were more advanced, but also just put me in a better place when maybe I got to the stages to use that. And also planning ahead, because if I know, okay, well, in 3 weeks from getting the offer accepted, I should be doing this. At week one, I can already set that, say with my solicitor or something. So yeah, I mean, 1,000,000%. I learned stuff that has never been in a book, will never be in a book, even in my own books, from my own podcasts, and they're free for people, and there's no adverts for people to listen to.
Mm. What's cool there, man, is the fact as well that every culture, every location is completely different rules. It's all kind of fugazi, like, isn't it? It's very much there and then, and making that kind of decisions. You put yourself at a nice position. I think you brought yourself to that table, and it's a combination of it's kind of trying what I'm trying to do, or other type of podcasts are trying to do as well. Is that when you're speaking to these people, it's often where you want to get to, but it's nice to see yourself in that narrow domain and bringing your other experience. I say this must have benefited you huge when you actually went to get investment. So like, what was the actual idea for this? Because of course conventional wisdom would say you work, you get some money, you leverage up to fuck, or not necessarily leverage, you just get a bite to let, or you put yourself under a lot of pressure. So conventional wisdom would say that. What would you say in that scenario?
I think sometimes conventional wisdom is just dumb, like I think I suppose it's like there is that way of doing it, but I suppose from speaking to people and from networking and from learning and from seeing that, you've got 20 grand, yet you've built these 100, that you're like, okay, that's interesting. Okay. Then, oh, okay, well, mortgage lenders lend you money. Cool. Bridges lend you money. Just kind of understanding slowly and changing my money mindset to be like, actually, this is very normal for people to lend money. Yeah, on your first deal, it's going to be harder. Why would you lend to a newbie? I wouldn't, I think a lot of people wouldn't as well. I think learning that, understanding that, and then knowing that, okay, well, this is normal. Here's how it's secured. Here's how it works. here's the whole structure of it. And then realizing, well, okay, do I want to do what a lot of people do because they don't have the network or the people around them or the open mindedness to see that you can raise money? Do I want to keep working, use my own money because I want to be safe and blah, all these bullshit excuses I hear all the time? Buy one house, wait another 5 years, buy another. Guess what? I'm 70. I can't walk. I can sit in there. Oh, I've got 10 houses. Oh wow, great. That's fucking useful, isn't it? What am I gonna do with it then? Like, you know what I mean? I'm not I don't need a gym membership then. I don't need a Lamborghini then. I don't need to go skydive. Like what like and I just find that approach like, look, it makes sense. It's safe. It's a traditional way. But and look, if someone wants properties for their retirement, then do that. Like, and you like your job, then do that. Like, of course, makes total sense. Most people who I come across, who read my book, who listen to my podcast, they're not interested in that. They don't like their job. They want it soon. They want an actual income. They want a business in property. And so it just doesn't make sense to do it that way, that kind of old school traditional way. It's too slow. I mean, look, every 5 years you're buying a house, okay, then you get an extra 300 quid a month from that house every 5 years. I'm not really here for that level of growth. Like, so I think it was my impatience, which I've learned to be patient, because if you're impatient, property will force you to be patient because it's so pathetically slow in every element. Like I actually hate how, like, property pisses me off more than anything. But we can talk about that later. But yeah, that's kind of why I did it that way and why I still do it that way.
I love that, man. I love the alternative thinking around it, because I imagine a lot of people around you, like friends, family, would say, "No, this is the way you do it. That's the way it's be done." That's you're doing good now at the moment. As you got one, you got two. Stop at this point. How did you approach the unlearning process of traditional behaviors? Because that to me is the biggest leak, even in my own behavior, is that I keep subconsciously conforming to how things should be done, quote unquote, but that's absolute bullshit. So I'm trying to do the unhinging process. How did you kind of approach something like that?
Yeah, so it's a good question actually, and yeah, very common problem or challenge, I suppose, for people. I think, firstly, I think I've just never, whether it's my genetics, how I've been raised, I don't know, but I've never thought of like there being like, you said kind of how things are done. I've never thought that there's a way that how things are done. I've always been like, this is how I think it could be done. What do you think? What does she think? What does he think? Okay, well, let's try one. Let's do one. I think, like, from early, I've always had that. Like, even when I worked in a job, and I was saying earlier, like, I went to my boss one time and said, "Yo, so you know how we're all here past 5, like
Mhm.
most times, and the contract says 5, and my salary is this. I assume, like, at the end, do you sort of count like, how dumb was I?" And he basically laughed and said, "No, no, 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 no. It's just normal. It's kind of,
Yeah.
I feel like punching him. Like, it's normal. No, it's not." So ever since, I've just always had a thing where I'm like, that's not how I'm going to do it. Like, and I've always been like that with anything. With
Mhm.
when I cook, when I do whatever. So I think maybe if people could take this kind of approach and say, well, okay, that's how it's been done, but how can we do it? If you keep doing things the same way, you get the same results. Do we want the same results? No, I don't think we do. Um,
Mhm.
so I think, like, for you, if you just look at it from a perspective of there's no way to do this, I'm going to do it how I'm going to do it. Like, obviously, with certain things, like if you're doing a bicep curl,
Mhm.
yes, there's variations, but give or take, 80% of the movement is the same thing. So you're going to do it the same. But if it's like, here's a problem, Darren, can you go and solve this? I don't care how you solve it, as long as we
Mhm.
come back with a result. So I think people need to look at it from a more open-minded perspective, and I think that will help. Also, the people around you, my parents, they weren't really bothered. They were like, yeah, do what you want, keep doing it, as long as my grandparents are probably like, and they're still like, are you making money? Are you making money though? I'm like, yeah. They're like, okay, everything's cool then, you carry on. And like, my friends at the time, yeah, I just didn't have, and I haven't got friends who hold me back. I haven't got time for that.
Mhm.
So again, having the right network who are like, oh, how many you bought this month? Oh man, amazing. What are we doing next month? Instead of, oh, it's quite actually, are you sure? Just get rid of those people or hang out with them, for jokes and dumb stuff, but don't
Mm-hmm.
tell them about what you're doing. So yeah, change your mindset, be more open-minded, and change the people around you. Like drop people ASAP.
100%, man. It's fucking environment design. It's why I'm in Singapore. I'm around these people who are absolutely killing it. Like average, I think it's like 6.5% of the population are millionaires here. And it's not to
Wow.
say you don't need to be. It's like the average GDP is $89,000. So it's like it's pretty
Yeah.
fucking high per capita.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a surrounding yourself in that. And there's nothing wrong with having, your college mates, whatever. But the environment design of who's, in your corner when shit hits the fan is just super, super important. It's why I like, I put caps on my phone for Instagram and things like this, even though I use Instagram and LinkedIn for a lot for my business. I still have like time caps. I don't want to get soaked into that bullshit. And I feel, man, to get to the stage that you're at needs that fuck you mindset to like other aspects. And that's just the way it is. You know what I mean? It's the way all the other guys, because where you're at like 28, 29, where you're going to be at 40 is where a lot of people who in their mid 20s will be like, fuck, there's no way you could possibly get to that. But at 28, 29, you're having those discussions now and you're putting the foot down. It's just, it's all mental, man. You know what I mean? Property, online business, your existing degree, it's all in the top 6 inches.
100%. I think that's a really good. I really like the way you said that. The fuck you attitude. I laughed because it's exactly what I have in every element of life. Like I've got to the point where I just can't even entertain conversations or
Same.
relationships. Do you know what I mean? Like if they're dead, then they're dead. Like I mean, look,
Mhm.
I'm not like 100% business. Like no, I'm probably the opposite. I'm probably like 100% fun and then some business.
Mhm.
But if like the vibe is this or that, like I literally glaze over and I start thinking about cheese or protein shakes or something. Like I can't deal with. And like my partner knows this sometimes, or she'll see my face, and stop it, like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, really funny. Like not to her, but say if we're with like talking to someone, and yeah, and I think my friends also sort of have a similar attitude, which is good because like if I was saying to you, like you just said there, yeah, I'm the same. If you said, "Oh, Tej, that's really rude. You shouldn't do that," I'm saying, well, you're in that category as well, bruv. So
Exactly, man.
you need the right people, 100%.
And that's why your friends are your friends, because you're hanging around with A players. You know what I mean? And you're not tiptoeing around, and that's the whole point. Is that what's the point of wasting your time? And it's not a fact that you made a great point about, you're not all business, because you're not. It's about taking a minimalistic approach, saying no to bullshit things, and then just focusing on things that what matter. Cheese, going to the
Yeah.
gym, having fun, doing a bit of travel, taking some time off for your wedding. That stuff is important to you, and that's all fundamentally what will get you there.
Hmm.
So I wanted to ask about how you went about approaching investors. So your background in recruitment, you have a fucking face of steel for rejection. How did that process go when you initially said, I'm gonna go raise money to go buy fucking houses somewhere?
Yeah, so it was I think because culturally, at least in England and probably America as well, I think Europe's a bit different, but property is such a, I think you could talk about property with anyone. At a dinner table, at like everyone's got some connection with property. Even if they
Mm.
haven't got a clue, but they've got some. It's just such a like British thing. And so I think because of that, it kind of made it easier to raise money. If I said, "Oh, you know what, I'm going to start a socks business," it'd be more of a slog. But I think because it's bricks and mortar and it's safe, firstly, it did make it, I think, a bit easier than say, "Oh, I've got this random coding algorithm. I don't know what it
Mm.
does, but it might change the world. Can I have a mill?" It's a different ball game. Um, and even though I was primed for rejection, it actually, my first investment was, from Instagram, put something up. These two guys messaged me. We didn't meet, as young people nowadays don't tend to meet, just generally.
Mhm.
Spoke on the phone for 8 minutes. Money was in my account. 2 weeks later, all sorted. I met them 5 months later on site because they were kind of doing like an earn and learn with me. That was about £57,000, and that covered purchase price. That everything was covered. So I put no money in. That was my third deal. So the first two, I put money in and used bridging and did some funky stuff with that, which we can get to. But I think when I started out, I had built my brand for at least 6 months, I think, of Tej Talks, podcasting, Instagram, Facebook, etc., being super active, networking. I was everywhere. Yellow was everywhere, and because of that, the raising it took one Instagram story and 8-minute conversation. If I didn't have 6 months of hard work, forget it. That Instagram story would have gone unnoticed. Nothing. People don't want to hear this, right? It took 6 months of social media work, which again people don't want to do. Posting videos, whatever, all these excuses. And for me, I didn't really realize this until I suppose I got that money. Maybe a few months later, I was like, hold on a minute, that was really easy. Why? Why was that so easy? It's because of the brand. Everything came through this. So for me, to answer your question, how I approached investors, it was more that they approached me because I'd built a brand on documenting my journey, being active and being everywhere with everyone, but also, and I still do this, showing the bad things and showing the negative things, which made people say, oh, I went through the same thing. Or like, oh crap, how do I avoid that? And I think it just, that vulnerability as well connected with people a lot more than just saying, yeah, bought houses, did a refurb, it was easy, we're done, like some people do. So yeah, that's how.
Man, speaking on the negatives is a fucking great point, because I think if you were just focusing on, done these houses, they look sick, people would probably smell bullshit because you'd be like, wait, this guy was in some random house and at the back of Scunthorpe, they're trying to fix their shed at some stage, people, because there's a bit more layers to it. You may not understand everything, but there's just layers to it. So that's a very like honest approach. You said 6 months building your brand. Man, that is not a long time. Some people spend years trying to build their personal brand. Like, your background, you've had a background in marketing too. Like, I can see those connections, the color connections, the showing up everywhere, that just the face everywhere, like that yellow is everywhere. That just builds recognition and branding. And it's the same myself, man. Like the consulting work that I do for companies, and mainly on the kind of podcast area of like online marketing. Like what you said there was so funny, but the calls, I'm doing them over voice note. So I'm sending voice notes, and people are like, yeah, they're closing them. They're not 50K deals. But it's interesting how you can get to, because people, back to conventional wisdom, you need to do all outbound marketing. I bet you didn't spend that much money on marketing. You've grown a personal brand. Put all the money into marketing, get a couple of leads, get them onto calls. A long process of trying to get a deal. Whereas for you, you just flip that switch, man. It's another example, and that's fucking incredibly powerful. And the fact you're bringing other people along that journey, especially other property developers, they can see the power of using Instagram. Because again, like, why are you on Instagram? Why am I on Instagram? I don't want to be showing just like fucking random pictures. You want to be using it for your business at this stage, That's the main reason for it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it takes a lot of work. People don't want to work. And
Yeah.
when people do want to work, they want a direct result, which is fine, because if it's like, if you said, if we had a closed business and we were like, we had, here's a list of tasks, we're visiting suppliers, is that going to increase our profit and increase our business? 100%. We're pricing up things, yes. We're doing a marketing plan, yes. We're doing the accounts, can't be asked, outsource, okay, fine. Social media, people always think, but that's not, that's not the clothes, that's not getting us the business. But no matter what business you're in, really, I mean, I even know like consultant surgeons, because I've had issues with my shoulder, on Instagram, like educating
Yeah.
and posting stuff. Now, if you pay them for a surgery, it's about $5,000. I don't know how much they make off that, but in today's day and age, is a young person going to want to pick a doctor who's on freaking Instagram explaining their issues, got all the animations, all that kind of stuff, over some, whatever 80-year-old someone who's there, you can't explain stuff? In fact, the person who's not on Instagram, 8-year-old, potentially better, arguably, in the world of surgeons, who knows? But you're going to get more business from having that. Now, if they're on Instagram, who, or social media, who isn't? How did we connect? Social media, Instagram. If you do one of my training courses, how do you know about that? Social media. How do you know about Gary Vee? How do you know about, like, it's social media? How do you know that Lewis Hamilton is doing what he's doing? Social media. It's kind of the medium of communication and news nowadays as well. So I think a lot more people are becoming more aware of it and the importance of it, but we're still miles off. But that's fine because we
Mhm.
can carry on, you know.
And people are getting it so wrong. I think you follow a nice kind of Gary V like model whereby all your branding is completely like online. And for people even like myself, it's not completely there because some people are kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out of entrepreneurship at the moment. They might be as a side hustle or whatever. So
Mhm.
it's over time. But I kind of, because I was going through your stuff and I was kind of thinking of it earlier, I was like, at this stage, if someone is not utilizing social media, whether it's outbound, whether it's building a personal brand, whatever it is, you're really shooting yourself in the foot. Because even if you have your own company, or even if you are working for a company you're doing really well, that job can be taken from you in a fucking heartbeat, and then you are left with your only brand. That's the importance here. um I want to ask you about, even on that, what would you have done kind of differently around when you're trying to build it? Like, what was the biggest issue for you, you think, when you're saying, okay, I need to utilize this? Like, where were your misalignments in the beginning?
Yeah, good question. I think, and I probably still don't do this enough. I can't be bothered, to be real. But it's kind of jumping on trends.
Mm,
At the start there was, nowadays everyone's jumping on the trends, but back then it was a lot less so. But like jumping on stuff in the news, I don't watch the news, but jumping on stuff in the news, jumping on trends, using filters, topics, whatever that were trending, using clickbait, even though I deliver on it. I suppose it's not clickbait, but I don't know what to call it. But catchy titles. I think just being a bit smarter with how I presented things, whether it's the words, the title, naming things, whatever. That's definitely something that I could have done better. I think collabs. I should have done more collabs. So with people who are bigger, with smaller, whatever. But just to kind of jump in and get to their network, that would have been really, really useful. I think from the start. I think a lot of people say you should have an avatar. Your kind of ideal customer, ideal person. I don't really have one because I have such a broad range of followers. And property, whilst it's very niche, it does attract a real broad range of people from all over the place. So, you know, would I go back and have an avatar? No, I don't think I would actually. So it's not something I do differently, but just something to mention while I'm there. I think I would try and outsource earlier. I was like doing the
definitely.
MailChimp stuff, doing the design, doing the. It's like, oh my God. So kind of reusing content a bit smarter and outsourcing some of the work earlier with my brand and business,
Mhm.
even though I thought I couldn't afford it, would have just, multiplied the money I made because it freed me up to do more income generating tasks that are more suitable for my brain and let someone else do something else that's better for their brain.
Man, I could not agree more. I'm kind of at two ways of this as well, because at the beginning, or even now, I outsource all my video editing, all my graphics, and that's a big part of a podcast. And I was thinking, I was like, fuck it, why didn't I do that earlier? Why didn't I get a good designer earlier? And I was like, wait, you had to get your process down. You had to learn how to do this. You had to understand why you're shit at this or why someone else is better than you. And it was only at that point then whereby I was getting a lot of inbound opportunities. A lot of people were looking for consulting and coaching. At that point, then that's when it was great for me to put that money in elsewhere. And it's a great trade-off because now I don't spend fucking 3 or 5 hours a week editing this podcast. I can get someone else to do it. And there's two things there. There's income producing activities, which are ultimately the best, of course, or I like to think of it as value producing activities, which for me could be health, relationships, just having fun, not necessarily going out and getting pissed, but I mean just like, just actually like enjoying myself. And I like to put them into two different brackets, because it's like we're so focused on getting caught up in all the small minutia, whereas for you, like, think of it, what you've learned from being able to outsource some stuff. And it's a common thing that's kind of happening recently. I feel like that we've been told, not to hire or not to outsource too early. Um, but really, like, the downsides of it are very minimal if you think about it. If you have your numbers somewhat understood.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, it is such a fine balance. And I think most of us probably do it slightly too late. And maybe
Mm,
that's where like a mentor and accountability partner could come in and say, sounds like you kind of need to not do that anymore. Or, because it's like you said about your process. Like, how can I could see some design work. I'm very particular about it and be like, oh, that I don't like that. And they could say, well, it's actually impossible to do what you're asking. But now that I can design and now that I understand how to design and the principles and everything, when it comes to me and I'm like, that's trash, because I know how easy it is to not do that. I can say, okay, well, I now have judged your work or your ability, and this is done. We're not working together. And so it means that you hire better people, because you're like, and if they say, oh, yeah, it took 3 hours, I'd say, I'm not a designer. It took me half an hour. What's wrong with you? So it really does allow you to hire and build better, because what it's like, when people are doing property and they don't understand refurbs and construction, I say you're being stupid, because a builder will come in, say something, and you'll say, "Oh, cool, man. Yeah, you want 10 grand to paint a wall? Okay, let me go get that." When it's like, if you know if you know about construction and refurbs to an extent, and they chat shit, you're gonna know. So people need to be prepared. Um, you got to do stuff you don't enjoy at some part of your business, usually at the start.
Yeah. Fucking great point, man. Unbelievable, because you can learn to do something like the refurb or whatever at a basic level. You can still be shit at it, but you still understand what the
Yeah.
process is. That's why, like I'm also working in a software, and like one thing that a director told me was that I'll never ever gain the trust of engineers, like proper back-end engineers, unless I go the length to try understand what they're doing. Now, by no means do I understand what they're doing, but I'm giving that kind of more vested energy into it. And as a result, people start to kind of respect you a little bit more. They get the behind you, they try to teach you, they try to encourage you, they try to let you, discover this for yourself. But if you're not at least making effort, then you're fucked. And it goes the same for a lot of things, man. Then you're fucked overall. I want to discuss some of the property element, because of course that's a big part of this. So what properties were you targeting? Why were you targeting them? And what's some of the opportunities there?
Yeah, so I never have targeted like a traditional vanilla buy-to-let, something that's done up already, something that doesn't need any work, so like a nice house. Because for me, that then goes to what we were talking about earlier, which is that traditional strategy. And if I was doing that and I wanted to just buy stuff and keep it there, then yeah, that would work and that would suit me, and I could do that. But because I do buy, refurbish, refinance, which is what it says on the tin almost, you buy a house really cheap, you refurbish it physically or legally, i.e., papers, deeds, whatever, lease, things like that. I then refinance it or sell it, which means, I've now basically bought it for 50K, did spend 20 on it, is now worth 100K. Cool. I can go to a mortgage lender and say, go value the house. It should be 100K. They value it 100K. They give me 75% of that. Quick maths. I've left no money in, because yes, I had to start with an amount and I had to put money in and I had to buy it and do the refurb and all this stuff. But at the end of X many months, when the work is done and I'm refinancing it, that money comes back out. And it's pretty freaking magical. Like every time I do it, 17 projects later, I'm still like, what? There's what? Like honestly, and I don't think I'll ever get over it, because it's just freaking insane to think you could own a house and not have any money left in it or no deposit in it, and you take it back out. Doesn't always happen this way. Doesn't always happen on all my deals. It is tricky right now in this market. It's not impossible, so we have to caveat it. But even if you're only leaving 5 or 6 grand and you've got 100 grand house and it's netting you 300 quid a month, quick maths, huge return, capital appreciation. If I wanted to buy 100 grand of stocks and shares, I need 100 grand. I don't know of a way that I can leverage 6 grand or whatever. So that's what I was kind of doing. I was always looking for, really shitty houses, the worse the better, structural damage, knotweed. Yeah, absolute shitholes is what we technically call them in the business. That's what I was looking for. And I still look for them.
What value roughly are you picking them up if they're like dog shit? Where are they as well? Are they based in UK?
So in the UK, I invest in the southwest and also in Hertfordshire, any of the shires, because I live in Hertfordshire. I was picking them up for anywhere from, the cheapest one was 28 grand, but generally from about 40 grand up to about just under 100. I find there's a sweet spot with kind of yield of about a sort of 100 to sort of 180 end value. I think 120 is probably the real sweet spot, where like you get because basically, as house prices increase, the rent doesn't increase that dramatically. Example,
That's weird.
yeah. So this house I'm living in now, we're renting paying 950 quid a month. Beautiful 2-bed in the countryside cottage. This house is probably worth 300 and let's call it £390,000. Cool, 950 a month. I have a cottage, 2-bed cottage somewhere else. That's got valued at £290,000, and that'll rent for about 900 a month. Okay.
Mm.
Let's go to Chelsea in central London, right? Where things are renting for 10 grand a month. That's a big jump. That's 10x. But the house is worth 8 million.
Mm.
So it
Not
goes up.
directional.
Yeah, it goes up linearly to a certain point. I think it's about I think 180, 190. I think then it kind of, yeah, the rent, goes up, the property price goes up dramatically,
Mm.
but the actual profit in the yield doesn't. So that's why people always say, "Oh, invest in London. You do it for capital appreciation, not for cash flow, because property costs so much, rent is mid-level, whereas in the north it's the other way around." So you know, I think there is a sweet spot for the best kind of yield.
Mhm.
So I say yield. I don't really use yield, but it's just an easy way to get to people to understand the profit you're going to make from it. There is definitely a sweet spot. Also, mortgage lenders usually, this changes all the time, don't really lend below £70,000 on a house. So you've got to be careful in some areas that your end value is not close to that, because I've had that, and it was incredibly stressful and painful.
Oh, so then at that point, nobody can take it off you because it's under the threshold.
Yes, and it wasn't supposed to be under the threshold because it wasn't worth that little. Like, I have all the figures to back it up, but let's not
Mm.
get started on valuers, Rick's valuers in the UK. They're all shite.
So,
Um,
man, is your approach so to kind of get these properties so that you're always letting them out, so you're generating cash flow versus like capital appreciation and sitting on it for it to ride its
so
wave in London?
so it's both, because look, capital appreciation, you'll still get it outside of London. London is just on another level, and it's its own market. You'll still get it in other places, but for me, capital appreciation doesn't pay the bills.
Yeah,
Doesn't pay
yeah.
for this laptop that I'm talking to you on. So, like, I generally hold and let out, because most of my deals I've taken all, if not some, of the money back out. So, like, it's a no-brainer. And I flipped. So of those 15, I kept 12, flipped 3, which are a long time ago gone. I've now got 2 more, which one I'm keeping or selling, depending. Let's see what happens. And the other one I'm selling and is, sort of in legals at the moment. So yeah, I do flip, nice chunks and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But historically, I have kept.
Makes sense. People will be asking at this point about like margin. So you mentioned there about like legal fees, selling, tax. Does it become quite squeezed at the top if you're selling?
No, if you're selling in your personal name, I suppose it could be. But if you're in a limited company, you've kind of got ways to, what's the word, to be more tax efficient. And also, you've got big expenses. To refurb a house, my last one cost 56 grand, and my profit on it 50, 60. So
Mm.
when there's a bigger picture and you've got a good accountant, you become tax efficient. And so a corporation, so having a limited company works better, and it also keeps your tax affairs separate. But look, people need to seek professional accounting advice on that.
True, yeah, and it's the same in Singapore. Like my company is a limited liability partnership, and it's for that exact reason. It's not a fucking individual. It's not a sole proprietary, whatever the fuck it is. I think just taking that. The reason why I'm asking these questions is because like the capital requirement or that would be seen for property is obviously much higher than anything else. It's like there's a lot behind it. There's a lot behind it, which is quite mad. You mentioned there about the shit is the companies and whatnot. What were some of like your like worst oh shit money, oh shit moments, like when you're looking at this and you're thinking, fuck.
I remember doing one moment where I had, say, 5 refurbs on at one time, 5 or 6 refurbs. And these are 200 miles away from where I live. I was still fairly new because I grew very, very quickly. And, the builders were just messing everything up. Everything was wrong. There were total cowboys, lies everywhere. I just had no control over it. It was just like, what? Like, imagine being in the middle of a tornado, but you're also in the tornado, and just looking around you, be like, my whole life is just spinning around me. What the, I'm on investor finance. I've got, these investors giving me money who are expecting a return in X many months, whatever. And I'm sitting here having no control over what's, because I couldn't, and being like, fuck, basically having a breakdown because I was like, I can't understand this.
Mm.
And you know what? Not being able to do anything about it was like, was, I suppose, like a hard part. Because yeah, I think having a lack of control, you'll know this as an entrepreneur, we hate it. We absolutely hate it.
Mhm.
That's why we don't outsource. We need to be in control. And so yeah, that just really broke me. And then to be fair, I've had oh shit moments every single hour of every single day of my whole property thing, because there's always some idiot being a bigger
Mhm.
idiot than they were yesterday. And sometimes I'm the idiot, and then
Yeah.
who do I shout at then? So, you know, there's a lot of bad shit. There's a lot of complexity, a lot of challenges, a lot of stress.
I feel like you manage it well, though. I feel like, you're mentally clued in. I feel like you have your emotions in check, which is a big thing because, like, doing anything entrepreneurial, man, is a roller coaster. Like, 5 p.m. things could be going well. At 9 p.m. things are a fucking shit show,
Yeah.
And I often find that, like, and sometimes I like check myself. I'm like, 2 days ago things were going well, and now today is miserable, and in 2 days' time things are going to be going well again. So there's always that. And you made a great point about control as well, because I found myself actually wanting to be more solo business orientated, less emphasis on social media, less emphasis on anything outside. I don't know what that solution is yet, but I was trying to think around those kind of parameters, being like, is there something I could do that would not involve other people? which is like a pretty weird thing to look at, But just thinking like that from a control aspect. So you mentioned the market being fucked. Okay. Now, someone who wants control, who's completely out of control with this, what's your approach at the moment? What's your thought process around where the economy is at and where potential housing is?
Yeah, so the market's been fucked for so long now, like at least a year and a half, maybe two, where it's just so much buying pressure, overpaying. I'm trying to find my own house to live in as well. Forget it. What, like, what absolute waste of time. I mean, well, there's no time to waste because there's nothing coming on the market. So it's like it's
Mm.
it's so painful. Let alone finding investment properties. And so here's how I see it. Like back in the day, I could have done, I mean, they used to say like 40 viewings would get you one offer, right? Following my strategy. Cool. Right now, I think it's more like 80 to 100. In fact, some of my mentees are telling me it's 80 to 100. Now, property's great and you should always buy it sooner rather than later because it goes up in value. But I'm the kind of person who says, I do not want to do 80 viewings. I I frankly just don't give a shit. So
Mhm.
I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to speak to some deal sources. I'm going to, try find some deals some other ways. But if I can't, then I can't. And I don't care. I'll
Mhm.
launch another business. I'll, continue with my education and mentoring and ramp that up a little bit. I'll continue putting time into my like community. I'm kind of in a position where the financial freedom is there and the portfolio is doing its thing. And these two flips I'm doing, one of them is bringing in more than enough to sort of just do one a year. Um, for most people, I would say. I just look at it and kind of say, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something else, or I'm going to change how I look. So that's how I approach it, because like you said earlier, that's my attitude. And I'm
Mhm.
in the position, I'm fortunate. I've worked my ass off that I can just say, there. Like I haven't worked for the past 6 weeks because of my shoulder and because of the wedding. Have I lost rent? No. Have I lost money? No. Is the world upside down? Has the world missed me? No, not really. So, you know, yeah, that's how I kind of see the market. the market was supposed to slow down and crash like every day for the past 2 years. It
For
hasn't.
the last 10 years, man. What the fuck are you on
Well,
about? Since
well, yeah, basically, Brexit was going to destroy it, and then so it's impossible to predict. It's possible to look at some of the signs and look at this, but then we're in such uncharted territories where you got stocks like Netflix moving like crypto, and crypto is just
Yeah.
absolutely effed. And we've got the war and COVID still apparently here. All this, like, there's so much going on that housing has really, really stood up with its chest out, big, and carried on, like going up in price. So I think there has to be a correction. There has to be a dip at some point. When? Don't know. I feel like it's going to be this year, just based off some of the indicators, which I'm not actually seeing reflect in the market,
Mhm.
but their indicators are there. And also the cost of living, I think that's a very real impact on housing because, I know we've got, things are always inflating and inflation's always there, but this stuff is like, it's bad,
It's
like,
vicious, man.
yeah. So I just feel like every household, apart from, the super rich and the MPs and Tories and stuff, they're not going to be affected. But most people are going to be affected to a point where I think they start to question if they want the finest Tesco finest oranges or normal oranges, and
Mm.
whether they really need to move, or that house has really bad insulation. I'm not, but things like that. That there's lots of stuff that's going to come into play, and I'm quite interested and excited to see what happens.
Yeah, it's strange. Like news in general is just a fucking. We're got to the stage now whereby you shouldn't be listening to the news in general. It just reacts. It's reactionary. It's made there to make you feel anger and rage. And I think, especially in the property area, that they're waiting for this. They're waiting for something to come up that they can cling to and say, "Oh, it's going back to like 2008, 2006 again." Feel bad for people that will end up in negative equity for a time. But again, if that's going to be their home, sure, they'll be fine once they weather it. But it'll be good opportunity for people like yourself then, who are looking and keeping their eyes open, still have their portfolio, still have the ability to pick up good opportunities when this does pull back, whether it's your own personal home or whatnot. So it's interesting. Like you can't sit and wait by the phone. That's just the wrong attitude to have. But it's good to see from like an investor perspective how you can actually manage it. How you can actually practically approach these things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, everyone's going to have a different view. Some people are happy. I've got mentees who are out there doing 80 to 100 viewings. They're finding deals, and it's great. They are there.
Hmm.
It's just dependent on, do they want to do it?
Hmm. And I think that's where that kind of buyer beware has to come in for first timers, people who are looking to kind of get even on the property ladder, or they're just trying to figure this out themselves, because you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're going to get burnt. Like rates are really high, they're not going to be able to kind of do the things that they would have thought that they wanted to do initially. So just something to be a bit more mindful of, I think. What do
Yeah,
you think?
100%.
So what would be your step-by-step process for people who wanted to start? So of course you have a lot of e-learning platforms which are great, man. Overall, I'm sure a lot of them look pretty sick. But when people are trying to get out their foot in this, where should they begin?
So absolutely begin with the free stuff and 50 quid on Amazon and buy a couple books, both of mine included. Like you just need to listen to podcasts, you need to go to some networking events, you need to just sit there with your ears wide open, right? And your eyes wide open and just take it all in. Do some basic financial planning. I can do it with you, but planning, looking at your incomings, your outgoings, how much cash you have, how much cash you're making, how much time you have, do you like your job? You really want to build a sort of, here's who I am on a spreadsheet, basically financially, so that when it comes to property and deciding, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, you can do it effectively from a position of knowledge, not I think it'll take me 3 months to do this, but and then just imbibe all the knowledge you can from the free stuff. Get confused, get lost in it, read stuff over and over again, and put yourself in a position where you're just understanding, what the hell is this thing about? Who does it? How do they do it? What do I need? How does it work? And then from then, you really need to look at, okay, well, here's my situation, which we've talked about. Here's my spreadsheet. Here's a strategy I like, or here's where I want to be in X many years. How do I go from here to there? and how do I change this spreadsheet to become there? I do free strategy calls with people where we go through this, and I say, okay, well, let's look at this. How are we going to get there? And at that point, yeah, you may want some paid education like my e-learning. You may not need it. You may not even want to be in property. You may come back in X many years and start. You may realize you ain't got enough money to do anything, but that's why it's important to have these discussions and to do all of this stuff so you even know what's possible for you. So that's what I would say to people is where people need to start. So many people don't do that and they just rush straight to, oh, I'm on Rightmove looking for deals. Do you know what a deal is? You know what I mean? So we have to walk before we can run. We don't want to, and Instagram shows everyone running, but they were walking at some point, or they're lying.
Exactly, man. It's bullshit because like what you said there is great is that a lot of people will not take the educational route first, the non-return, the non-financial return. But that's the best place to be in, man. When you're lost, great point, man. Being lost in the process, looking at it and saying like, what the fuck is this calculation? What's this going to do? What's that going to do for me? Like, why do I need to do that? It's getting those meat and potatoes out of the way. I think it's the beauty of learning something. And I think when you have that attitude and come back in a couple of years and make that purchase, whatever, but it's good. It's good to put yourself into that kind of cell. Apart from being on Rightmove and doing dumb shit on that, what are some of the other like common mistakes you see people run into?
Not understanding what a deal is. So not understanding the end value, the refurb cost, anything like this. Underestimating how complex refurbs can be, underestimating how scummy builders are as a species, underestimating how hard property is, not realizing that it takes so long to do anything in property, and then thinking they're going to be financially free in X many days, not using social media, believing the bullshit trainers who promise you financial freedom in 7 days and with only 7 hours of work and all this rubbish,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of relates to people being a bit shallow and like society, a bit shallow and superficial ourselves, that we believe it because we're like, oh yeah, I want it in 7 days, I want that car, and I what, not really thinking, hold on a minute, how is this possible? And I get it, it's not easy though, because society conditions our minds to want that, to get a dopamine hit from it, to not
Mm-hmm.
question it, and to just believe what we see and to want it. Of course I want financial freedom in 7 days, not 7 years. Who doesn't? So there's a lot of things at play here. It's not just like people being silly. There's a lot of kind of different factors here.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think those are the biggest mistakes that people make at the beginning. And also, a lot of people just are too entitled. They just send messages on Instagram or post stuff and just expect people to help them. Or, so can you tell me how I invest in property? And you're like, that's like 40 hours of me speaking. What's wrong
Mm-hmm.
with you? And asking like really broad. There's no such thing as a stupid question, but there are some stupid questions. Questions that aren't going to help. I'm thinking about investing in property. Any tips?
Oh
My
man.
my answer is work hard. Now, is that
Mm-hmm.
going to help anyone? No, because the question's shit.
Mm-hmm.
Give specifics, give some more information, ask a specific question from an angle that is going to benefit you, because then people are more interested in answering then. Like, any tips is the dumbest thing I ever get sent. Because there's just no answer for it. So yeah, people need to ask better questions to get better answers to then help themselves do better.
It's such a shit show, man, because like we're being pushed down this idea that we can get anything really quickly. But if you look at the best people are doing it, of course, there's people that are a couple of more years further on than you now who are killing it. Those guys fucking blew accounts. Those guys did loads of stupid shit, and it's like that's the narrative that you want to be following. Is that okay? I can be successful in this property, investing, online business, anything, but it's going to take a shitload of time, consistency, and just putting the foot on it. That to me, I think is more valuable, and that's where most people are falling down on, And what's funny? That's what fucks up the risk management side of it too, because then they'll take their first opportunity, they'll throw loads of cash into it, they'll get absolutely rinsed out of the place, and end up back at the nine to five that they're trying to escape from.
Yeah, 100%. Well said.
Man, I'd like to say a massive thank you. I love your insights. I love your attitude. I think you're onto a great path, and I wish you the very best going forward. So where can people find a lot of your details? I'm gonna put all in the show notes, but what in particular?
Just type in Tej Talks or Tej Talks property into YouTube, Amazon, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, wherever, and hopefully I shall appear in yellow. But yeah, thanks so much for having me, Darren. I really appreciate it. It's been good fun.
Pleasure, man. Thank you so much. Let me